Welcome back to the local edition. I'm Jason Dole. This weekend, there was going to be a holiday market and fundraiser supporting local cannabis farmers in Kingston, New York. It was called Local Smoke. It's not going to be happening now, but we're still going to talk to one of the organizers to learn more about this event, but also to find out what happened to it. And it was a collaboration between Kingston, Chronogram Media, and New York Small Pharma. So let's hear more from Nicole Ricci, President and Treasurer of New York Small Pharma. Nicole, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So, I should also point out to listeners that Small Pharma is spelled with an F, so that's F-A-R-M-A. Can you give us a brief overview of what Small Pharma is and how it came to be?
Sure. Well, New York Small Pharma was founded by a group of activists in New York several years before legalization happened, and they were fighting for legalization, for social justice, and redress to those communities most impacted by the racist implementation of the drug war, as well as ensuring that we have the right to have home grow, the right to grow outside, and that this new industry consider the environment so that we don't have all the same missteps of our past industries, which are extractive and take away from the environment and cause environmental degradation. Cannabis has the potential to regenerate and rejuvenate the soil and the environment, including the climate. So we push for regenerative cultivation of cannabis and raising awareness about that.
So can you tell us, what was this event going to be, and now why is it not happening?
Sure. Well, the event was going to highlight social and economic equity participants in the cannabis industry. Most of the farmers are economic equity licensees because they are struggling small farmers. These are all sun-grown farmers that use the sun to grow their cannabis, some in greenhouses, some actually outside. And it was to highlight the local farms from the New York. There's so many outside brands that have moved in already to New York that are on the shelves. This was just local cultivators owned by local New Yorkers and brands created by them. So it was all local only sun-grown, and it was to celebrate this, New York's entry into cannabis, into legal cannabis, and to raise awareness about the differences in social economic equity within the cannabis industry, the differences between what is considered local and what is considered out of state, and the fact that we have so many registered organizations, these big corporate cannabis companies that are now coming in thanks to OCM, Office of Cannabis Management, that has allowed them in 3 years early. So it's sort of to raise awareness on all that, raise money for the farmers, and to celebrate New York's local sun-grown, which a lot of it is really spectacular.
So what happened? Why isn't the event happening now?
So the Cannabis Growers Showcase was instituted by the state as a way to allow small farmers to sell their products directly to the customer, because the rollout of the industry was so slow. They only have 23 dispensaries open. It's been mired in all kinds of problems and litigation. So these showcases were a way to allow farmers to move products. And because they can be expensive to rent a place and to advertise, the state allowed them to attach themselves to ongoing events. So they could be part of the state fair. They could be part of music festivals that were taking place. They could be part of Cannastock that took place in the Hudson River Valley. And then the Cannabis Grower Showcase could take place within those. Most of those events had alcohol. And even though alcohol is not allowed in a Cannabis Grower Showcase, the state blessed the ability for the Cannabis Grower Showcase to be within an event that served alcohol, because the Grower Showcase itself was separate from those alcohol sales. Our event was only cannabis, no alcohol. We don't have any alcohol. We were only providing free cannabis and allowing for consumption of cannabis outdoors in legally designated area. You're allowed to give away cannabis up to the legal possession amount to anyone 21 years or older, and you're allowed to smoke cannabis outdoors in most areas where you're allowed to smoke cigarettes except for your car. You can't smoke cannabis in your car. But Office of Cannabis Management and the Hochul administration were very upset that we were openly stating that one can smoke cannabis in the state of New York, and that we were willing to give cannabis, that we were willing to have an open dab bar. You have open holiday booze bars all throughout the holiday season, at weddings. People are very known for open bars, but when it comes to consumption, the Hochul administration and the Office of Cannabis Management are so set against it that they termed it as illegal, even though it's not legal. Even though it's not illegal, it's perfectly legal to smoke cannabis in the state of New York. I think we all know that, but they declared it illegal, and they denied 18 farmers, some of whom this would have been their first chance to sell this year's cannabis, 2023, and some of them the first time that they were even attending a cannabis showcase. And the showcases are closing on the 31st. So this was not only their first, but often their last time to do it, and they've denied them all. These farmers are just trying to make money, to make payroll for December, to buy gifts for their family. They're hardworking New Yorkers that, work the land, and OCM turned their back on them entirely and turned their back on all of the patrons that wanted to come and meet them and enjoy this event. And they turned their back on our organization, which literally volunteers for the state, helping them process licenses for social and economic equity for free. We've donated over $30,000 worth of employee hours to Governor Hochul's administration to help the governor process social and economic equity applicant licenses. And they turned their back on all of us and refused to permit the event.
Did they give an actual legal reason? You say that they said it was illegal. Did they cite any of the current regulations or anything in this?
No, they're not that sophisticated. They just stated that consuming cannabis and giving cannabis away was not legal in the state of New York, is what it says on the document that we received, and that they termed those activities as illegal, both in cannabis law and in the regulations, which of course is inaccurate. I know that they're understaffed, but they're also maybe somewhat unfamiliar with the law.
Yeah, and how is the Office of Cannabis Management doing in your view and the view of the growers that you work with?
Well, I imagine that their job is quite difficult and challenging, but I have to say, we have found how they're doing to be less than acceptable. We asked them to review. We had 2 farmers write a letter. We wrote a letter. We asked them to review the denial, and they refused to even look at the letter. We reached out directly to the Hochul administration. They refused to look at. They didn't even respond to us. So that type of, I think, comportment, it's frowned upon by definitely my organization. I think the farmers are appreciative that the OCM, I don't want to speak for the farmers, but I do believe that they're appreciative that they've allowed for these cannabis growers showcase. I can only imagine most of them are disappointed to be turned away and disappointed that those grower showcases are sunsetting. So, I don't want to speak for the farmers, but I imagine it's very difficult to work so hard and to grow a crop and do everything legally by the book and then be shut down by the administration that is supposed to be supporting you and, rewarding you for following the rules. Instead, it seems as if you follow the rules in New York, you're going to fall short. It's better to not follow the rules is the message that they seem to be putting out there.
Yeah, I mean, part of the backstory of this is that there wasn't enough dispensaries opening to sell essentially the product that these farmers have been growing, and it is a perishable product in many of its forms. I mean, that's part. It sounds like that hang up is part of what your event was trying to address.
Yes. We were actually celebrating the 2023 harvest, so all of the items that would have been for sale at our event would have been fresh off of the curing process. So the cannabis is harvested, it's dried, and then it's cured. And then everyone has their own personal preference on how long they like to cure cannabis or how long they like their cannabis to be cured before they smoke it. And then it goes to testing. And so the products at our event would have been all the 2023 harvest, the celebration of that. But yes, there is a shelf life to these products. Depending on how well you cure your cannabis or if you flash freeze it can last longer than others. But absolutely, like any living thing on this planet, there's a shelf life to it.
Along the lines of talking about New York's Office of Cannabis Management and the things that you were saying earlier, that you said they're allowing out-of-state growers, big companies in 3 years early. From your point of view, is that something that the Cannabis Board is choosing to do, or is it something that they've been forced into because I know there was out-of-state companies suing New York over this issue?
It's something that they chose to do. Ultimately, it's their decision. But yes, I believe it was part of their settlement agreement with those registered organizations. But the fact that the Cannabis Control Board is constantly seeking to cut deals and, take the shortcut versus address the issue, I think it means that they really haven't solved anything. We're just going to see more and more litigation continually crop up until they actually address the issue. One of the things that they were sued over was the social and economic equity plan, and specifically the conditional adult use retail dispensary program, which they allowed only those people that have convictions to be eligible to apply. And a lot of people thought that that was a great thing. And while we don't disagree that it's a good thing, I would just merely point out that having a conviction in itself is not a social and economic equity category. And this law was authored by Senator Liz Krueger in the Senate with, strong assistance and co-authorship from Crystal Peoples-Stokes in the Assembly. And it was a hard-fought law for many years with many activists and senators and Assembly members really fighting for social justice in this law. And to see the cannabis industry sort of kick off with really out a nod to social and economic equity with sort of this other program that Office of Cannabis Management sort of created. Since then, many people have come out in support of CARD. The people that have applied for the CARD, many of them all of them, I'm sure, are great people. But not all of them necessarily fit the description that the social and economic equity language in the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act, now the cannabis law, really meant to address, which were individuals from communities disproportionately impacted. And then, of course, if you were from that community and arrested and met an income, then you hit extra priority. But an arrest alone, it wasn't enough. Really, it wasn't considered a social and economic equity category. So you could have been arrested and been a rich person, or been arrested and not really had any other, or been busted with a joint, but not really had any other suffering, like an individual from a community disproportionately impacted, and qualify for that CARD program. So it's a bit of a controversy, but they definitely received a lot of litigation on it. And the result of that litigation is where we are now, the deals that they've cut, letting the ROs in, or the registered organizations in early.
Okay, and you went right into the next thing I want to talk about, which is how is New York State doing in terms of making sure that the rollout of legal cannabis is as equitable as possible. This was my biggest question when, the laws were changing, when the Cannabis Control Board was first formed. This was something that I kept wanting to know because almost 3 years ago now, back in February of 2021, NPR filed a story called America's Next Generation of Legal Marijuana, New State Laws Focus on Racial Equity. One of the things that they noted in there is that in states like Colorado, where they had to try to have something that's equitable in the state's laws, like they essentially failed. And so I was looking at this from the beginning, wondering, is New York going to be able to pull this off and actually do this in an equitable way? So that's kind of still my question. That's why I'm talking to you about it. It sounds like you're saying it's kind of bungling it.
I mean, I would say it's fair assessment to say that they've bungled it. I mean, they initiated the entire conditional program based on whether you were a hemp grower or had been convicted or arrested for cannabis. I apologize. I'm not sure if it was just an arrest or that you actually had to be convicted. But those were the two requirements. Social and economic equity was not a requirement to get a conditional license. So for me, in my perspective, not even speaking for New York Small Pharma, but for Nicole Ricci, who is a lifelong New Yorker and who fought for legalization, that to me is disappointing. It is actually heartbreaking to see that. That is not to say that those people that got the conditional processing or cultivation or dispensary licenses wouldn't have met those other categories. Some of them would have met those other categories, but that wasn't the intent of the regulators when they set up this program. And so for that, I find the program disappointing. And, since then, we haven't really seen a lot of action in the realm of social and economic equity. They have done a few things here and there, but we really haven't seen it. And I think coming out against cannabis culture, coming out against consumption, denying 18 farmers the ability and it's not just those 18 farmers, right? They all have employees. They all have families. Their employees have families. It affects hundreds of people when a business suffers, and to deny them based on consumption and without even a dialogue with an organization that has been volunteering time for this administration, to me, that's all a bungle in my book. That's how I define it.
And I guess finally, the thing I wanted to ask you about is I was shocked just a couple months ago to hear reporting in New York State that talked about essentially illegal, non-certified dispensaries in the state. I was shocked to hear how many there were, that there are thousands of these. So you're talking about certification processes that at least were intended to make some headway in terms of equity. And but here there's all of these unlicensed dispensaries that are still out there in New York State. Right.
So they have done very little. They have done some, but an extremely small amount to address the illicit shops in New York City. And because of that, grower showcases that take place in the city are doing quite poorly. And legal dispensaries are even suffering. There's a lot of legal dispensaries that aren't doing well. So because there are, like you said, thousands and thousands of illicit shops, meanwhile, again, I hate to hammer this point home, but meanwhile, for these legal farmers that were setting up a legal market, they were all over our website, all over our Instagram, conducting investigation to try to determine whether we were doing something legal or illegal versus just having a conversation with us and then denied the market. They have time to do these things, but not time to work with the legal players to ensure that they have the ability to sell. And, I just think that as soon as those large, MSOs open up, as soon as those large registered organizations open up, many of them already on the shelves of the dispensary, I think anyone who's out there trying to start a dispensary, especially under a social and economic equity plan with little funds and, already marginalized in society with difficulty reaching loans on a regular basis, let alone in the cannabis industry, which is ninefold more difficult. I just think that they're in a very difficult position. And I just don't know that OCM's priorities are in the right place when I see some of the choices that they're making and action that they're not taking.
So what is next for Small Pharma? And by extension or on the side, what's next for you?
So what's next for New York Small Pharma is we're definitely, we're working to figure out our next event. It'll be invitation only. Anybody who wants to go to the event who doesn't want a refund, we'll definitely have an invite. If people want a refund, of course, are going to refund their money. We're going to work on our next event. It's going to be focused on the farmers because that's really where we focus. Farmers and social economic equity. We'll be focusing on, the small players, the micro licenses, the tier 1s, tier 2s. And we're going to hold an event that brings them together and supports them. And we're going to continue to bring education and science to the cultivators and assistance and resources to social and economic equity and regenerative cultivation to the state of New York. So we're not going to be discouraged or bullied or chased out in fear. And we're going to continue to celebrate cannabis culture and exercise our legal rights to consume cannabis outside of our house. We don't have to hide in our homes to consume. And we're going to continue to let people know what the law is so that this type of thing doesn't happen again.
Okay. Well, again, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us and just giving us all this information. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your interest. I really hope that some listeners are interested in learning more about what we do, and definitely come to our website, www.nysmallpharma.org. We definitely need the support of the people because the struggle is real and the mountain is high. And this was a big hit for us. So we appreciate all the patrons, and we will have another event coming up soon, and we look forward to seeing everyone there. Thank you so much for your interest. I appreciate you having us.
Okay, Nicole Ricci, President and Treasurer of New York Small Pharma. This has been the Local Edition. Daily is up next right after these headlines from NPR right here on Radio Catskill. Listen local.